Ever since the Detroit Lions lost their star pass rusher in Aiden Hutchinson, there has been nonstop rumors about the Detroit Lions making a massive trade at the upcoming trade deadline. Whether it be Max Crosby, Miles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, Hassan Reddick, or somebody different entirely, there is no lack of rumors and there is no lack of suspicion around Detroit when it comes to trading for a star pass rusher. But despite the Detroit Lions not making a move yesterday, while the rest of the NFL seemed to be very active, they did make an extension. They did sign a new player to the defensive line, and they have had several rumors swirling about what they could potentially do in the upcoming days. And today, we're going to take a look at exactly that the updated trade and news and rumors surrounding the Detroit Lions and what it means for the Detroit Lions' near future as well as their long term success. So, let's start off with the biggest news coming out of Detroit yesterday, that being the extension of fourth-year defensive tackle Alim McNeill. Alim McNeill was the third ever player drafted by Brad Holmes. In the third round of the 2021 NFL Draft, Alim McNeill was an athletic freak. He was a project player from NC State that had a lot of upside, but also had a little bit of room to grow. In his first 2 years, Ali McNeill showed a lot of flashes, but also showed a little bit of inconsistency, specifically as a pass rusher and as a true pass rushing threat. Ali McNeill was seen immediately as more of a nose tackle, as more of a run defending player, but over his career has developed very nicely into a well rounded player, and I believe is one of the top 10 defensive linemen, or defensive tackles at least, within the entirety of the NFL. He signs a 4-year extension with $97 million attached, with $55 million fully guaranteed at the signing day. Now, over the last 3.5 years, Ali McNeill has been excellent, with 52 games under his belt, 120 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 24 quarterback hits, 10.5 sacks, 3 passes defended, and a forced fumble. Ali McNeill has been the head and leader of one of the best running defenses in the NFL over the last year and a half, and has been one of the most underrated defensive tackles in the NFL for almost the better part of 4 seasons. Now, a lot of people felt like the Alim McNeill contract was an overpay. Some people were asking, why not give that money to Max Crosby? Why not give that money to X player or Y player? And why not give that money to a superstar edge rusher to replace Aiden Hutchinson? Well, when you compare Alim McNeill's deal to another young defensive tackle in the NFL, Derek Brown, a player that very recently got a very similar contract extension, it's pretty easy to see why Alim McNeill deserved the money that he got. Now, over the last couple of years, Alim McNeill has played one more game than Derek Brown. And in that time, Alim McNeill has just 2 less tackles for loss, 4 more sacks, and has played less defensive snaps overall. Derek Barnes has been asked to play more snaps and partially was due to the Alim McNeill injury. But despite playing one more game, Alim McNeill has less sacks and quite a few less snaps on the season. He has 4.5 more sacks, meaning he's got to the quarterback significantly more than Derek Brown, as well as having 2 less tackles for loss. But overall, they are very comparable players. Over the last 3.5 seasons, they have put up nearly identical stat lines and get nearly identical contracts. Now, why some people think that the Derek Brown deal was a steal and the Alim McNeill deal was an overpay, I am not totally sure. They are very similar players. They bring very similar things to their franchises. And I think both players were well deserving of the contract extensions that they received. But to just kind of put into perspective where Derek Brown and Alim McNeill are as players, they're very similar. They are among the top defensive tackles in the NFL, and I think that they are both very deserving of the contract extensions that they got. Now, in other news, the Detroit Lions made a signing on the defensive line as they sign third-year NFL pro Isaiah Thomas to the Detroit Lions active roster. He's being signed away from the Cincinnati practice squad and has not played since the 2022 season, where he put up 10 games in Cleveland, had 9 tackles, a TFL, 2 quarterback hits, a sack, a fumble recovery, and 2 passes defended. Now, is Isaiah Thomas going to be the savior that replaces Aiden Hutchinson? Probably not. But I do think he is pretty good depth for the Detroit Lions defensive line, and adding him to a bunch of rotative guys like Isaac Ukwu, like Josh Pascal, like Levi Onwuzurike, and James Houston gives the Detroit Lions at least a little bit more depth at the defensive line. And I do think overall those four are still better than the pass rush the Lions had a season ago. If you compare those four players to, let's say, Charles Harris and Romeo Okwara and Julian Okwara and Isaac Bruce from a season ago, the Lions' depth at pass rusher is significantly better, right? The four guys we have now are better than the four guys we had a season ago. So while the Detroit Lions do not yet have an alpha pass rusher, they do have better and more improved depth, as well as a improved defensive tackle group, which I think will be able to push the pocket. And a much better defensive line coach that I think will get more out of his players this year than last year's coach was able to do. Now, with the Aleem McNeil deal, the Detroit Lions cap space currently looks like this. Now, these are estimates; these are not exact numbers, but these are pretty close to what the Detroit Lions can expect from their cap space over the next 4 seasons. They still have almost $34 million to spend this season if they want to take on an expensive contract, with $58 million the year following, $57 the year after that, and then jumping all the way to $152 million in the 2027 season. Now, while those numbers look very good, very healthy for the cap space, and overall look to be very impressive, that number is going to shrink very, very quickly. As in just the next 2 off seasons, the Detroit Lions have to make the decision on whether or not to sign several of their key foundational pieces. Derek Barnes is in a contract season and needs a contract extension. Kirby Joseph, Brian Branch, Levi Onwuzurike, and Josh Pascal are all contracts that need to be decided within the next 2 off seasons, as well as some big ones like Jameer Gibbs, Aiden Hutchinson, Jack Campbell, and Jamison Williams, who are all up and coming in the next 2 off seasons as well. Of course, the latter of the four players having a fifth-year option, but still being very expensive within the next 2 to 3 off seasons. So while the Detroit Lions seemingly have a lot of money, they really don't, right? They have a lot of players that they need to resign. Aiden Hutchinson is going to be close to probably $30 million, if not more. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph are going to be $15 million a year plus at the very, very least. I think Jameer Gibbs is probably going to get 12 to 15 million. Jamison Williams is probably going to get 15 plus million dollars. So that money is going to disappear really quickly. That money is going to be spent on players that are already on this roster, which is why I don't believe the Lions will make a move for a guy like Max Crosby, which is why I don't think they'll make a move for a player of that caliber or that price tag, but could instead maybe go for a player with a lower price tag or a more immediate impact to the cap, eating up some of that $33 million, but then also allowing the Detroit Lions room to breathe if they need it in years down the road. Now, with that being said, the Lions have been involved in trade rumors. According to Pat McAfee's show and Adam Schefter as of yesterday, the Detroit Lions have been calling. And while they didn't specifically say it was the Detroit Lions, it was pretty heavily implied that the Detroit Lions were the team that they were talking about, that were potentially making a call and potentially looking to make a trade. And I don't think that is necessarily an unrealistic or a bad idea for the Detroit Lions. They are missing an alpha pass rusher. They are missing that player that can, cause a double team, that can force the offense to game plan around them. And I think that they do need that player to win a Super Bowl. Some of those players that I think are a little bit under the radar that we have yet to talk about. Trey Hendrickson, I know we did talk about the other day, but I think with the 2-4 Cincinnati Bengals probably not being playoff contenders, Trey Hendrickson being 30 years old, already having 5 sacks on the season, if the Lions could trade for him for a 4th and a 6th, or a 4th and James Houston, or even a second-round pick at this point for the next 2 seasons, I think that would be worth it for the Detroit Lions. They get an alpha pass rusher for this year. They can pair him with Aiden Hutchinson in 2025, and then they can get rid of him. He has no impact on the cap space after 2025. And in fact, even though he's signed through 2026, if they cut him after the 2025 season, they clear up $12.5 million of cap space with zero dead money attached. Zadarius Smith is another option I've seen thrown around quite a bit, the veteran player for the Browns. The Browns, of course, just trading Amari Cooper yesterday for pennies on the dollar, I think could trade Zadarius Smith for as little as a sixth round selection, right? He has 3 sacks already. The Browns are 1-5. They are selling some of their more pricey contracts. Zadarius Smith will not have a long-term effect on the cap, but could bring a number one pass rusher to the Detroit Lions, or at least bring a little bit more depth and a little bit more talent for a roster that is in severe need of a pass rusher. Trayvon Walker has been an interesting player that's been thrown out there as well. The Jaguars are 1-5. Trayvon Walker has been good, but hasn't been nearly as good as they might have wanted out of a first round selection. He has about 2 years left on his contract, which is still quite a bit of time. He has 5 sacks on the season. He has been very impressive, but I've seen the rumor thrown out there. I think he'd probably be upwards of a second round selection, probably a day 3 pick, but that is an interesting option to pair with Aiden Hutchinson, the former 1 and 2 overall picks from their respective draft classes. And then, of course, Azeez Ojulari, a player that has 3 sacks on the season for the 2-4 Giants in a contract year, could be nothing more than a fourth or a fifth round selection to take Azeez Ojulari, add some pass rushing depth, add some pass rushing talent, and potentially add a little bit of juice to the Lions' pass rush overall. Now, I think there is a timeline for the trade. Obviously, the deadline would be the absolute last opportunity that the Lions have. I do not think a move gets made before Minnesota. I think Brad will ride it out for at least a week. He will go into Minnesota, see, hey, what do we have? Is Josh Pascal going to step up? Is James Houston going to step up? Is Trevor Nowaske going to step up? Is Isaac Ukwu going to step up? Is the Lions pass rush of Pascal, Levi, Aleem, and Reader going to be enough to still shut down the run and still get some pressures on the quarterback? And how is Aaron Glenn going to game plan around the loss of one of their best defensive players? I don't think it's wise to make a panic move before week 8. I know that week 8 is very crucial. I understand that this matchup versus Minnesota, even as early as it is in the season, could potentially decide the NFC North Championship, but I still think it's a little early. I think it's early to give away your first round picks. I think it's early to give away any high compensation or any massive contracts to a player that has not been on the team and has already proved it. Now, if they go into week 8 and they can't really get a pass rush on a pretty good Vikings offensive line, and, Sam Darnold throws for a lot of yards and the secondary really can't keep up and hold up their end of the bargain, then I think it's more likely that Brad Holmes goes out and he makes a trade for a player and the Lions bring in some pass rushing help. But if the Lions go out there and they surprise people and James Houston gets 2 sacks and Isaac Ukwu gets a sack and, Levi and Aleem and Reader can compress the pocket and Josh Pascal can, blow things up in the middle, then there might not be a need. Right? The Minnesota Vikings have a really strong offensive line. If the Detroit Lions can scheme pressures and if the Detroit Lions can put together a good pass rushing performance against the Vikings and walk out with a victory versus a very good Minnesota team, there might not be a need to trade for an Aiden Hutchinson replacement. There might not be a need to trade for Max Crosby or trade for Myles Garrett, which is not going to happen, or trade for even a Trey Hendrickson. We do not know what Brad Holmes is going to do. It seems like they might be gearing up for a trade. From what I've heard, the Aleem McNeil's extension actually gives the Lions a little bit more money over the next year or two, which could be, obviously telling of what they might want to do with it. But as of right now, we don't know. We don't know how good the pass rush is without Aiden Hutchinson outside of what we've seen in Dallas. And in Dallas, they were pretty good. They had 2 sacks after Aiden Hutchinson left. They had 3 turnovers after Aiden Hutchinson left the field. We don't know what this defense looks like without Aiden Hutchinson. We know they still have 2 elite defensive tackles, or at least an elite defensive tackle duo. We know they have elite safeties. We know they have good corners. We know they have good linebackers. This is still a top 15 defense in the NFL, even without Aiden Hutchinson. So I think it's just time to wait and see. I think we'll have more information after week 8. And with that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the Detroit Lions trade rumors. Do you think they should go all in and make a move, or do you think they should wait a little bit, at least another week, and see what they have in their pass rush and see what they can put together versus the Minnesota Vikings? I'm very curious what you guys have to say and what you guys think. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.